Who do you know that likes to be called narrow-minded? I know I don't know anybody. It can belittle you as a person, disregard your education, and make it seem like you're intellectually out of touch. Like I've heard plenty of times Christians being called narrow-minded, especially every 4 years when it comes to politics. And yes, I'm here to say you're absolutely right, but it should be an honor to be called that. It's the Christian way. Let me explain for a moment. Let's go to Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14, New Living Translation. It says you can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. So the gate is something used to either keep something in or to keep something out. And when it comes to our decision making, we have two gates or gateways by which we soak in information. Our eyes and our ears. What are we looking at, and what or who are we listening to? Because that will heavily influence what's in our mind and the redundant thoughts we continue to have. A psychology study found that over 90% of our thoughts are repetitive, meaning what we constantly put in our gateways matter. Finishing out verses 13 and 14, it says, the highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is very difficult. Only a few ever find it. Notice it says very narrow, and the road is difficult, meaning prone to pressure, criticism, or persecution. So the way to God's kingdom is not meant to be comfortable or trendy. The opposite way is broad. Going to hell is broad. That's the 6-lane highway as opposed to the one-way street that is narrow. So the definition of narrow, I got a few here. It means less wide or to make less wide. And it says when you narrow down your choices, you decrease the number of choices. Also says of slender width, of less than standard or usual width, limited in size or scope, barely sufficient, minutely precise, meticulous. So Christians are supposed to be narrow-minded because it's the Bible that's supposed to govern our thought life and decision making. And we know the Bible isn't just about one or two things. However, we see in Scripture certain behaviors and examples in the Word that grieve God's heart more than others. Look at Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis 18, he said the outcry against that area is great and their sin was very grave. So what was Sodom and Gomorrah known for? When you search it out and look, it was based heavily in homosexual sin amongst other abominations. In Ezekiel 16, it said Sodom did detestable things. And when you translate that as far as detestable things translated in Hebrew, it means something morally disgusting. Jude in the 7th verse says about Sodom, they gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. And perversion is just everything just flipped upside down, meaning something like in today's time, like transgender. Man wanting to be a woman, woman wanting to be a man, and everything in between. So it's clear that homosexuality and other sexual perverse related acts is something that God takes seriously. Like he don't like it. Like he took Sodom and Gomorrah out, so we have to look at that as an example. And we know all sin is bad, and there are different degrees and severities of sin. Proverbs 6:17 names one of the 7 things God absolutely hates and calls it an abomination. The one that comes up the most is the hands that shed innocent blood. And I don't think you can get more innocent than aborting a baby that's in the womb. And when you study abortions here in the U.S. or just in general, you find out over 85% of them occur within the first trimester, which is the first 13 weeks of pregnancy. A fetus is able to pump its own blood by the end of the 5th week. And a majority of abortions that are done here, they're done after the 6th week of pregnancy. So if you average out the numbers out over the years, America has been responsible for well over 2,000 baby deaths by a day by abortion. Let me say that again. Over 2,000 baby deaths a day by abortion. It has become so rampant and such a normal part of culture that a lot of people don't think twice about it. And recently, especially during this Walsh and Harris campaign, they've renamed it or rebranded women's reproductive rights and put it under health care. So Christians being narrow-minded on two issues, LGBTQ and abortion, is not man's idea. It's actually God's. We're just following the blueprint. The enemy wants us to be broad thinkers, or to be driven by being a broad thinker, and to be so nuanced that we let our intellect drive our faith instead of our faith guide our intellect. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 speaks to that in verses 20 through 23 in regards to wanting our own wisdom and secular knowledge to be on equal level with God's way. This is in the NLT. It says, so where does this lead the philosophers, the scholars, the world's brilliant debaters? God has made the wisdom of this world look foolish. Since God in his wisdom saw to it that the world would never know him through human wisdom, he has used our foolish preaching to save those who believe. It is foolish to the Jews who ask for signs from heaven, and it is foolish to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. See, we know God is in control. Us in general, I mean, just overall. We know God is in control and Jesus is king and sits on the right hand regardless of who wins this American election. We also know some idolize a political party or a candidate, but that's not the general narrative most of us are coming from. We go to one extreme to another just so we won't be held accountable for doing the right thing and being a good steward with our vote as followers of the way. See, man, politics is just a tool, just like hip hop is a tool used to influence culture and make an impact to our neighborhood, region, and nation. To downplay the significance of using a tool is to downplay God using any of us as vessels to get things done in the earth. If there's any tension to carry any at all, or especially during this election day or election season, let it be the tension of counting the cost and recognizing the responsibility of being a disciple of Jesus Christ in today's culture. Above all else, remember this. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Until next time, y'all. Salute.